The Return of Painting, The Pearl, and Orion, a Trilogy, by Leslie Scalapino. The Return of Painting, in memory of Margaret Evans. A novel. People going to small shops, on a street one over that runs parallel so that it is not facing them. There is clement weather which is not varying in this place, though the day and the night are not the same. The young person living there, having an intense tortured as if tearing in half pain in the middle, waking lying asleep, though this had only occurred this one time. The day and the night being free of the one person, who hadn't had this tortured sharp pain as if to tear her in half except this one time. The man lying, waking, staying gently with her during it through the soft darkness, and then ending in the warm, balmy day with the people around who go down the street. The physical pain that was only the one time in the night ending in the light weather when early day had come was inexpressible. The young woman took no drug to end it and lay all day without it, and in the heavenly, physically light day of early or afternoon, she could not have a thought, or having a thought with no drug and now no pain in the blissful, physical day in which the thought did not move. There were no animals around except for the people who go down the street. The pain was simple. The doctor did not want to treat her, fearing it was serious and might be trouble to her who was the doctor. It was eventually treated, but did not occur inexpressively as it had again. She had a job which was simple for money. The job was waiting on guests at the table of a blind 96-year-old woman who was astonishingly perceptive though wealthy from birth. Money from birth is a lack. The young woman had to stay overnight away from home, waking in the morning to wait on the very old blind woman. Only she could see the view, bright blue from their high building among other high buildings and the bay. Not wearing a uniform, she went down and bought the newspaper at the Mark Hopkins Hotel. There was no low work, but the people recognized that the young woman who was not so young, 35, and her function. Wearing her ordinary clothes, she walked into the high-ceiled Mark Hopkins Hotel to a shop in the arcade to buy a newspaper in the heavenly morning. Her job was simple. She had no animosity and liked the blind, very old woman. Limousines piled up to the curb at the street, and the young woman returned to her, going toward the doorman at the high building in front of the bay. The old woman bathed very white skin, which she liked to do herself, standing with someone averted nearby. One breast was missing, but it did not matter in regard to her being beautiful. Dressing her, she wore a wide hat and long gloves, and a silk dress which was blue. A woman, similarly aged, wealthy from birth, lived downstairs, who had been deserted. The very old woman's chauffeur had run away with the whiskey and silver. Other servants refused to work for her, so then she was left literally with chocolates as someone's gift, and was then sent down a sandwich by the blind other old woman wealthy from birth, who, nevertheless, had a man take it to her instead of the young woman who worked for her. An old man died, told to the very old woman by phone, in the high building by other high buildings and the bay, but which was open and blue. She wept, frightened. There was a vacant space where the employer was taken somewhere by others one day. The young woman walking down the hills into Chinatown alone with the bay visible and down Columbus Avenue. In the night, the job of the young woman was to read her a book. The aged woman, barely able to stay awake, was excited by the story of people she actually knew, who were on the walls in pictures. The White Russians, who were the last to leave, whom no one would accept, were drifting in a ship in the middle of the sea. They were thrown overboard when they died of typhoid, the ship drifting in the blue sea. The old woman sleeping in the very late darkness as it was red, while the young woman, really 35, followed the shallow, innocent reactionaries, some of whom died. Getting up to have coffee alone in the high building among the other high buildings, and the street below down to the bay, and waiting for the very old woman to wake. This woman really reminded her of someone else, though the other person, was not wealthy from birth, which makes a difference because people as that regard themselves as special, which is nothing. Though the old woman now really was special in some which were other ways. She died a month from then. The first other one was similarly dainty and regal and astonishingly perceptive, which was in her skin, centered, standing with cheroot in mouth by railing of ship. In port, old sitting in cart, surrounded by beggars, had not been wealthy from birth or anything of that sort. She did not seem to be old, though she always was to that memory. When this other woman, old then, was killed in an accident, she said to her son beforehand when he came to the door which was opened for him, "I thought you were the archangel come to get me." The young woman imagined the accident, and the coffin while it was occurring before she knew about it. Afterwards, she dreamed the old one was riding slowly up a hill, seen sideways, not turning, without speaking. And that was now a long time ago. It must be given up. The couple stood by the sea on the boardwalk in the hot weather when all the people came out to walk or stand. Hundreds stand leaning on the sea wall along the curve which extends on the sea rim of the city. The couple looked over the sea wall, seeing rats beginning to mass and to scamper and fight on the rocks. There is no beach. They were not to open their doors onto their balcony at the hotel. In another city there is no childhood. There is no such thing. Crowds of family or workers could be seen from above from a bus winding through the streets. The shops were open. People worked in light hectic work, with great effort which did not cease in the day. Millions of people can be seen from outside in the one side open shops and houses. This did not remind the young woman not so young, because it was the same. Beggars or people starving lying in garbage, fruit rotting rinds a foot deep in the street, though that was not happening now. A starving man lying holding out his cup to her, though he did not care. In port, they had been walking, a ship's mate, a grown man, walking slowly ahead of her, looking back as if to watch out for her who was the little girl. Pigs were embedded in lily bogs, and large cattle were also. The green lily pads were enormous, and the bogs occurred here and there in the city. There is no childhood. People are the same, or they're not at all the same. Very beautiful flowers, what is that? Anemones, which are animals. The man and women fuck, though he doesn't this time for some reason of his own or does, but he sucks her with her legs parted so that she comes, but he does not know it. They go down the street, or out. He does not know she has come that way. China Basin, where's that? All the trucks going in the streets except for the young woman's car. The trucks honk at her when she is slow or does not know where to turn among the warehouses, so that the man who's a grown man in one of the trucks doesn't know what turn she's going to make. Not anemones, which are mature men standing with their legs planted apart, one walking to the cab of his truck after the young woman asked him for directions, and he'd said them. The man of the couple perhaps did not come on that time, anemones, and she had when he had sucked between her legs with her legs parted. The mature grown man didn't know she had then. Some other time, winding by the rim of the blue heavenly bay in the car, there is no childhood. Other men in the neighborhood where the illness becomes noticeable having had this time to come up to the surface. The bathhouses had been open for a while, and then that had changed, which was some time ago. And the sores that are the indications of the illness which will lead to that person's dying look obvious on some men walking in the neighborhood who are out. On many people. Other men flock in the street dressed in leather, flooding into the middle of 17th Street, where there is a funeral parlor. Driving, they're seen at a distance, a crowd open, congregated, but in front of the funeral parlor. More of them. It's not old age, that isn't it. In the depression of the young person fragile man, or his concentration, the young woman hailing some fragile man she knows from a distance, crossing a light. Other grown, mature person, tough, who's lost muscular control, in a wheelchair, takes time fighting. His ashes thrown or scattered on the yard of a center. Line of people or crowd clothed in leather, flooding out when a person comes around the corner in a car on the open, very clear street. Blind, very old, acute woman before has her listened to a tape of someone saying, cradling, maggot-eaten, dying person in the arms to not have that one individual die on the street. There is no childhood. There is no such thing. Retrieving the maggot-eaten person from the street and wanting the babies, the little babies, to live, who had not been born yet, listened to on the tape in the high building, which is in front of the open blue bay, active. Whose? Another man says he does not mind and does not the decomposing, beautiful decomposing, holding to lift the tough, mature, unspeaking person who'd lost control, shit from that sick man on the young man, if it may be visible, open. The young man wanting to be alive, that's all there is. There is no childhood. Couple go, driving to border. Just see is the line along which they're going. They fuck. The woman does not fuck at first. She sucked on the man in a tent on the sand by the ocean. The young man holds back, trying to, lying down on back in front of her, and comes. She knew that he did then and later. Other first old woman had died in accident, when young woman was really a young woman. She'd said the archangel was coming to get her out of nowhere, going out the door, putting a radio into the young woman's hands. Here, you have this. Old woman from out of car slid or floated alone along the highway, but was dead. A woman with her, younger but not so young, out of the car lived. Strangers sat with this one. It was raining. They held a coat over the living woman. The young woman, at a different time, not the one in the car, had no money or job. Money is nothing. Jobs are nothing. Days open, walking down the street, though she was in misery at that time from something else, from having been with a man which now, with that person gone, was extreme pain. From no money, she tried to sleep. In the darkness she remembered the one thing there was to eat there, an orange. In the soft darkness, alone in bed, coming back to it with it, peeling the orange, its odor scent in the dark, eating it, eating, and then the physically light day without the orange scent. She was very thin. The orange was the same as her, the person, regardless of no job. People in bar with maroon or orange hair, very blissful bar setting. Whether there was, or whatever they had been drinking, only a little. The people the same as them. Before, she'd had an extreme surface which came from being with someone and him now being gone. Going out for a walk, because she felt very sick and had to go out. People walking along, went further and further past them, up the avenue until stopping to drink a juice. She sat at the juice stand. The people serving her there were suspicious, wanting her to move on from her appearance. She was not able to continue, realizing she was really physically sick, and it was simple. She had a transitory illness, not from him, the same as them. But what had happened in the other situation was there. The men dying of the other illness, not identifying with that. She met a man who had a very serene identity, not identifying with it. The couple went to Guero Negro. Coming there in the evening, there was a sandstorm. Sand floated across the roads, the couple coming into the poverty-stricken miner's liquor store where those men waited in line to buy liquor, the same as them. In the tent on that time of her not fucking the young man, when she sucked on him, with him lying on his back in front of her then. When she worked for the blind, very old woman, the job was to wait on her at the table with the very wealthy visitors, not as an extreme surface, but as open clear, without animosity, which was hard for her to do, though they may be innocent or shallow, or may not be those, though wealthy from birth. She did this. She really did. Going to the ink corporation, that was for some work, a surface that was in connection with a job of hers, so in action, driving, winding among the warehouses by the blue open rim. Going to that ink corporation and the color of the ink having to be exactly the same, which is impossible, whether it's an action. The men dying of the other illness, not identifying with that. Being in the public bus as it's driving on the street that runs parallel to where they used to live but moved, and then turns left, the bus going down towards the blue bay, which is extremely silly. So it's coming up against being silly. Boy drives car with girl and woman who was then young woman and older mature man away from the funeral afterwards, so that it's only an action. That being what they are attempting, that it only be an action. Boy was driving just after the funeral on New Year's Eve, so it was at night for many miles at the first along the ocean, the highway all along the way with many police in cars and on motorcycles. The boy chatted with the girl in the dark front seat exchanging when the young woman and the older man in the back seat of the car. The boy speeding very fast received a ticket from a cop who stops them and looks surprised and questioningly into the back seat at the older unspeaking man. The boy began to speed again. This is impossible because it was in the past. It must be given up. After the funeral, and receives a second ticket from a cop who are catching people. The mature man didn't say anything. The boy who's driving received a third ticket from a cop at night. Impossible because it's in the past. Regardless of the funeral, though it was related to that. Impossible because it's in the past, and dependent on the older unspeaking man for it to only be in action, regardless of him not or refusing to stop the boy from speeding. In the cop, just that one, looking questioningly into the back seat at the older man, as writing. That's the only thing that's important, writing. Reading. The rhino is shot, but from appearing in the high grass showing trotting into the shallow, boulder-filled stream in front of the humans of whom it is unaware. And the bullet squeezed off with the wonk of it, and from his trot he seemed to explode forward, so that it seems to be the same as this, someone else's writing. With a whooshing snort he smashed ahead, but lying in high grass somewhere in there behind some bushes. They hear a deep moaning sort of groan and a blood-choked sigh and go forward to it, slowly joking, whisperingly. The writer of that, who the rest of the time is reading, having said, seeing it, trotting in the grass, "I'll bust that son of a bitch." The rhino was lying on its side, dead. The writer of that, which the young woman is reading, having been reading himself while on the trip. Right. The somewhat older woman who lived through having slid or floated out of the car and lying in the rain. Her fingernails, from the moment presumably of the accident, lose their moonlines, registering the shock to her light body which returned later. She had not been wealthy from birth, having the opposite of that circumstance, and not identifying with it as identity. The leathery, transparent old rhino being busted in high grass light as the young then of that somewhat older woman standing in the boiling sun earlier on a railway platform, providing shade by casting a shadow on the young woman who was a little girl. Beggars on the platform as the girl leaned over, vomiting in the sun, but not identity. Seeing a film in which appears unexpectedly, innocently, mature, tough, grown man whom she, this person now, recognizes, and who is, in the film, exactly the same age as the young woman, not quite so young, seeing the film. He was angry in the film, then speaking, moving in a crowd which pushes up to him there enraged, on the screen in front of the audience, who'd been in the dark back seat of the car driving up the coast after the funeral, who's also her father. Not identity of her, and it is, which is just amazing. Going is like playing badminton or some ball game in the clear open day afternoon, crossing the light intersection, hailing an, in that case, fragile man who's crossing at a different side or corner of people fanning out in the street, and with an open space. In the area of that illness, and writing is all that's important. Clement weather, and almost the same at night. Man burst in at door of bar, seeing his friends who deserted him, he says, at some place, and it was because he was really utterly drunk, and floats by their table when they say there's another person he knows seated down the bar. It is a soft, open night outside. He takes a hold of the wrong person's head, turning it towards him, saying it's not him, while the man whose head it isn't is seated two down from the man whose head is in his hands, and the bartender said he's going to veer back to the table where they were for him to keep going to the door. The man sleeping 3 nights on the street in that week where people live is nothing. They were walking, laughing, trying to curb him, putting his hand through a broken glass in one bar as they're going down the sidewalk to leave the bar with him in the heavenly dark night along cafes and bars. There's an open space. Just turning around the freeway underpinnings in the small old car, but fast as was needed onto the overpass by the high buildings and the bay in the dark. The young woman, and lots of time spent doing that and not doing anything else. Living woman who'd been busted out of car and slid on highway, earlier as light young flesh woman running to catch a subway. Entering the subway door, she fell flat on her face on the floor of the car, which is very funny to her, the other people in the car turning away as accustomed to not see this. Didn't do anything else for a while. Old first woman who died in accident did hula many nights for the children who were in her family. They'd get to request this before sleep, the hula in her heavy corset. But not the identity of the circumstance. A huge white barn owl sailed up to the window of the 2 men, one the man who'd been sucked on in tent, seated, discussing what they should do. They said that made them decide, and then it flew or floated off among the warehouses, low, going leisurely. In the film, Bobby Seale, recorded older, seated, relaxed, said they'd had to figure out some way to get money for guns. Just got the idea and began selling Mao's Red Book of Sayings at Sather Gate, sold at $2 after buying them for 25 cents. We hadn't even read them yet, he cracked up laughing. Didn't read it until selling them maybe for 2 months, and did get some shotguns and a few guns. This is brilliant. Reading afterwards, literally. The young but mature woman drove in the car for a few hours in the usually clement weather, which is the same, the weather becoming intensely, penetratingly, amazingly cold then. There was no heat in her car. She wore a thin jacket and almost tissue-thin dress, and finding a thin blanket in the back, wrapped it on herself. Stopping standing then to get gas on a hill with the freezing wind cutting through. Men standing around her putting gas in their trucks. They were wearing heavy jackets as she clung wrapped in the thin blanket, entirely invaded and cut through by the freezing. One man said to the other standing on the hill, "Why is it so cold?" She knew she could die, that she would. Reaching home in the cold, not able to open the door, her hands had become too cold and couldn't turn the key. It was not just frightening. Right. Her hand turned the key. Inside, the house was cold, not as cold as outside. Her bones had been reached by the wind. Her entire flesh invaded, pervaded. She lay on the bed, under the covers she constructed, and then the body beginning to violently shake. The flesh, like a grapefruit woman, slept in the night as if she were sealed. The thin blanket in the car had saved her. The next morning, reading the newspaper in her robe and slippers, and many bums froze on the street. Living people interviewed who'd wrapped themselves in garbage bags, a woman saying she is waiting to be taken away by her lord in general. Many bums remaining, rounded up, taken away out of the weather. The pervaded flesh of a man walking up the street one day, and to have to know that, which is silly, coming up against being silly. He is, they are. Out driving, but on the bridge over the bay, and when getting to ramps or overpasses, a car is on its roof burning like a flare or torch. Driving, coming around the corner to corner, where there are prostitutes, always standing and walking, trucks that are junk wrecks here and there on the street. A man on bicycle is stopped negotiating with one of the women. Many trucks rumbling by on the street. It is an open, clear space. Whether the person or is there, which is silly, in the blue, blissful day. An otter ran across the sand. It was the size of a large dog, sleek, dark. Feeling is nothing, it is not feeling. It ran into the ocean, seen. Such hot weather. Driving, saw cars and vans, and girls in a tiny yard at the intersection playing in the water sprinkler, so their breasts and nipples, hair in ringlets, were wet, and stylized wrestling or something utterly incredible, with a sole adolescent boy in front of the people in the cars and vans, there, in the very hot weather here. Actions are nothing. This is impossible. Have used them up, and writing isn't anything. The older man, very sick in the hospital in the crisis, and not stylized or is, loved, and geared to this, writing. September 21st, 102 degrees Fahrenheit, October 5th, 1987. The man sitting up over the corpse as a vigil is arising from him not having money, though it is done with care for someone passing away. And not from lack of money, which may be, but doesn't matter in the person who died. It is the culture expressing itself in dance, there being that which is beautiful and not related to dying. It here, the culture isn't related to lack of money or to there being that. So the two things coming together is too much. It's too much to float between the two or to be violently rushed into the culture. Unbearable to try, but which people who are poor do also in the area of drunk wrecks on the street, and then the people entirely separately going to the dance. May. Some people can't stand it. Not the man sitting up all night in the hours, and the others not doing that in the vigil over the body which had died of the illness. It is too much to bear the contradiction. Standing in the dark at the filling station, the young woman to put in the $1 worth of gas in the other person's car, which they could very well do as filling it, when it should be more. The older man having a bad infection, the bloody fluid drained from his side, intense pain, screaming, though he gets better. It's not that of money. The dancers do modern expression, and some wore ballet toe shoes in the same dance, which is what it was about. It doesn't matter. The crisis doesn't or always doing that it is that, though it has worn everyone out. It was clear open anyway, whether it was unbearable in its contradiction also, whether there's $1 worth of gas in the car and could be filled and should be so as not to run out, and always having that kind of situation or behavior of the gas in the car not enough to go far, on her part and theirs. To have violated or going against the procedures of the novel by doing them. The otter dark sleek, as large as a dog with sleek legs running across the sand, is the contradiction also. Its being some other animal does not stop that, or not more so but as much, and very open clear, so that there is no doubt. Some dancers in the past, many a whole varied troupe, so that there were a variety of scenes which could go on at the same time in front of everyone, dived into the mountain of dirt on the stage swimming madly, some seeming to drown and others swimming to save them madly. The dancers in another night walked or dined or anything on the stage in a pervasive surface pool of water, not swimming or drowning, but moving in it, doing whatever, so that it was the same as the dirt. There was no dirt then, which is the contradiction, and writing isn't anything, as is the otter, geared in that, then. She's given too much painkiller at some point, drug, and realizes few people care about each other. She feels or knows they do not care about her, though he does. She does, or they do. What does it matter anyway? Ever. And not as a negative or frightening thing, though it is frightening. Others at other times or periods not frightened by it. And so much over something small, which is incredible. Go out for a walk to the market. Sunlight light, a little tiny white bird with some kind of orange bill peeped in the gutter, then flies back down again on the walk, peeping in front of her, not moving, for feeling is nothing, then flies away. Melon, such a wonderful melon served to two by others one evening. Open utter fear. So what? That is what everyone may or will feel as surface. A dance, another one in the past, going on for hours. Many people on the stage unfolding scenes. A man swimming in a blue porthole. Lines of trees floated by in the spectacle when the performers moved the other way than the trees, the most beautiful thing. And that is acting. Out. Public. In that would be the only way to know, which is extremely silly. This is not fear, and it is in the past. Not like this. Film of samurai remembered, though it isn't this, on hill and wind flags flapping violently, and them planted in seats overlooking the battle when many of samurai or attendants are shot, and are not to move, though they win from this. Another dance or theater, small scenes in different spots visible from the viewers, there is no stage, being above, people dining or going to sleep, the unfolding of the World War in these scenes seen. A Japanese general at the line of performers at the head of it shouting, in just that acting, not this. Someone else's acting. Sensation does not matter. It is not sensation. Theirs. No derivation.